Hi everyone, my name's Ellie Brown and I'm the Strategic Evidence and GIS Manager at Ribble Rivers Trust, and I'm going to give you a quick introduction to an online decision support tool that we put together for the Turning Tidea Collaborative, the aim of which is to help practitioners who are working to improve bathing water quality figure out where the issues that are impacting on the bathing water quality might be coming from and what they can do to improve the situation. So this decision support tool that we've created is hosted online. It's available for anyone to access, and it pulls together a range of information that is mostly already out there on the internet, but is just spread about in loads of different places. So we've tried to collate it and pull it all together into one tool that is usable by anyone. So because the tool is available online and anyone can come across it, the first thing that's on here is that there's an introduction to what the Turning Tidea Collaborative is, a little bit about the bathing waters that are currently failing within the Northwest. So this whole tool at the moment focuses just on the bathing waters that are currently failing in the Northwest, of which there are 10. But it's worth saying that we are in the process of working towards getting funding to expand it across the whole of the Northwest for all bathing waters, not just those that are failing. So here's a bit of an introduction about the Turning Tidea Collaborative and the specific bathing waters that are currently failing at the moment. So this whole online decision support tool is fully interactive, so you can see which specific bathing waters are currently failing, learn a bit more about them. You can click through to view the full bathing water profile for each of those failing bathing waters. So this is what the Environment Agency publishes. And we are going to be expanding this for all of the bathing waters in the Northwest. There's also a tab on here that's looking at pulling together all the monitoring data that's available that could help practitioners to figure out where they need to either do more monitoring or where potential issues might be coming from, from a certain area of the catchment or coming down from a certain tributary and so on. So you can see all the information that is available online from the bathing water quality testing that the Environment Agency does, and again you can click through and view more details for each specific bathing water that's currently failing. It pulls through all the Environment Agency's open WIMS data that's collected for all reasons, and it's specifically looking at information or monitoring data relating to E. coli and enterococci, because those are the things that are measured to assess bathing water quality. So we've pulled together all of the data surrounding E. coli and enterococci concentrations so that practitioners can see where the high levels or the high loads of those bacteria might be coming from. So at the moment this data relates just to 2020. No, it doesn't, it's 2023. But we are going to include all data that goes all the way back to 2020. So there's a couple of ways that we pulled this data together. One of them is that we've presented it in a chart like this, so you can look at any type of water habitat essentially, and you can see on the map where the testing points for those habitats are. If we're looking at E. coli concentrations in rivers and running surface water samples, on the graph you can see which sites have consistently higher concentrations of E. coli when they are tested. So for example, this site here looks pretty bad compared to a lot of them. So if you click on that bar on the graph, when my internet catches up, you will see that it's highlighted on the graph on the left, so you can see that actually from this data, this site looks like it's particularly bad for E. coli, and from the map you can see that this is where it is. And so the tributary here, there's obviously something upstream of that point that's contributing high E. coli loads into the freshwater network. So you might want to concentrate your efforts upstream of there in terms of either investigations or further monitoring or figuring out what interventions you might want to implement. This is another representation of the same data, but this time It's time enabled, so you can, on a day-by-day basis, look at what the results were on different types of water bodies. So different types of water bodies are symbolised by different shaped points, and the results are symbolised by the colour. So essentially you're looking for dots that are red because that's where there was poor water quality in terms of bacteria levels. So as with any of the maps, they're fully interactive. So if you click on a dot, you get more details about the results that were obtained at that point on that day. Some of them have these yellow halos around them, and that's because those are sites where, oh, it's not in the right place, where some extra monitoring was carried out there. So there was an analysis on the bacterial and mitochondrial markers that would suggest where the bacteria was coming from. So I don't know if you can see this particularly well, but it splits out whether there was bacterial or mitochondrial markers that suggest the fecal pollution was coming from horses or humans or ruminants or seabirds or canines and that kind of thing. So you can start to piece together what the source of pollution might be in rivers that are experiencing high levels of fecal pollution. There's also links on here to the Environment Agency's Hydrology Data Explorer. So this pulls together all the data for every rainfall and river level and river flow monitoring stations, which is really useful to view in combination with that pollution data, because seeing what's happening in terms of rainfall and river levels provides the context of where the pollution might be coming from. Because if you're seeing a spike in pollution immediately after rainfall, or high levels of rainfall, you might be able to piece together that actually it's because there's lots of fecal matter running off the land from agriculture, or it might be because there's been some CSO spills in response to that high levels of rainfall. So it's all around piecing together the puzzle of what might be happening and what the source of pollution might be, so then you can start to think about how you might tackle it. And then also on here there's an interactive map again that shows the tidal currents, because tidal currents aren't the same all the time, that they do change on a daily basis. So there's this again time enabled map where you can see day by day how the tidal currents are changing around the coast and around the bathing waters. So here we're looking at the Ribble estuary, and we can see on a day-by-day basis how the tidal flows might be transporting nutrients around the mouth of the Ribble estuary. So there's also a page on here that looks at the potential sources of fecal pollution. So the inclusion of anything on this page doesn't say that it absolutely is a source of fecal pollution and it is a huge problem in terms of impacting on bathing water quality. It's more looking at where there's a risk of fecal pollution, either by land use or activity or that sort of thing. So it's risk mapping essentially, and it's made quite clear at the start of this page that that's how the information should be interpreted. It's not there to point the finger of blame at anyone to say that they are the problem. So at the top of this page there is again an interactive map that shows all the data relating to reasons for not achieving good WFD status, and it's specifically looking at those reasons for not achieving good that could be related to sources of fecal pollution. So anything that isn't really linked to fecal pollution is not included. And again, you can click on buttons here that enable you to see just a specific reason for not achieving good, and the map will update accordingly, or you can click on an area on the map and again you get a pop-up with a summary of the information for that particular water body in terms of what those reasons for not achieving good are. And then there's various categories of data here in terms of risk factors. So there's a whole category around food production, so there's maps on here around livestock densities, which have been pulled in from other websites. And there's also some results of predictive modelling that looks at land use, shape of the land, rainfall, livestock densities to map the risk that faecal indicator organisms might be being inputted into rivers from that agricultural livestock. So you can see where your risky land uses are. Again, if with a lot of these maps, if you want to focus on the water, the land that drains into a particular bathing water, you can click the button on the left, and you only see the information on the map that is relevant to that bathing water. It obscures everything else. There's also a map showing where the businesses are that process these animal products, as well as where the livestock auctions are, so not just the land where the livestock are held. And if we're thinking about food production, obviously we can't forget about arable food production, so there's a map on there that shows where those arable land uses are, because a lot of fertiliser, both organic and inorganic, is spread on arable land. So if that organic fertiliser could contain lots of E. coli and enterococci and other faecal indicator organisms. And it's the same with allotments and horticulture. So especially if we're thinking about chicken farms, a lot of chicken manure is actually taken off the land and spread on allotments and horticultural areas. So there's a map here showing where they are. It's not saying that they are an issue, but this is where those land uses are, which might be a little bit more risky. And then we come to the section about wastewater. So there's a map on here that shows where all the CSOs are. And obviously there's data for some that are available that around spills in terms of number and duration every year. So this map that you come to first shows a summary per water body catchment of number of spills and duration of spills, and essentially the darker the purple, the greater the number and duration of the spills of CSOs in that particular water body catchment. So those are the riskier ones in terms of possibly having greater bacterial loads. And as with other maps, you can click on it to just see the information for certain catchments of a certain bathing water. But you can also see where the specific CSOs are that have monitoring on them, and what the specific results are for a certain CSO. And again, you can click on points and get a pop-up. And I haven't been doing this on many of the maps, but you can zoom in and see, you know, that fine level of detail about the locality. Or if you want to, you can just see the information for the CSOs that have been flagged as likely to be having a direct impact or more of an impact on the bathing waters. So you can obscure all the other data and only see the ones that are particularly risky for the bathing waters. There's a map on here showing where all the consented discharges are. So not all of them are monitored in the same way as those on the map above, but you can see a hideous amount of consented discharges across the northwest. So you can see where they all are and what type they are. We don't have a map of misconnections on the greywater network. That's just not something that there is. It's based on local knowledge, but there is a note on here to remind you that this is a potential source of faecal pollution. We're working on a map to show where there's likely to be concentrations of septic tanks in the environment, and so the more septic tanks you have, the greater the chance that some of them are likely to have faults with them and leaks, so that could be another source of pollution, but that's not available just yet. And then the next section considers recreation. So again, it mentions allotments and horticulture. And then the next map shows where popular dog walking spots are, and there'll be absolutely loads of them that are just by the river and so on. But we don't necessarily know that. But public parks are a place where lots of people go to walk their dogs, and so this map shows where all those public parks are, because it's likely that there's going to be a bit of a higher concentration of dog feces in this area, which could run off into the freshwater network. There's a map showing where all the campsites or all the known campsites and caravan sites are across the northwest. Again, not saying that that any individual one is contributing any form of pollution into the freshwater network, but it's not uncommon that you get misconnections. So this shows where they are, so that if you wanted to arrange some form of investigation or monitoring, you would know where to start. And sorry, it's not across the whole northwest, it's just for the 10 failing bathing waters currently, but we will be looking to expand for the whole northwest. Canal systems are not without their risks in terms of faecal pollution. Obviously, the canal boats have got onboard toilets. There's certain points where you have to pump those out, or there might be leaks associated with the toilets on individual canal boats. So there could be stuff coming out of the canal network into the freshwater network that then travels down to the estuaries and the bathing waters. And similar for docks as well, with other types of boats in them. So we've got maps showing the canal networks and also where all the docks are in the catchments of the failing bathing waters. So there could be high levels of E. coli, enterococci, other bacteria that result in illnesses that are coming from people who have these illnesses, and it entering the wastewater network from those people. So this map just shows a record of food poisoning cases over a 12-month period recently. And then there's a map as well that shows where all the hospitals are. So it might be that high concentrations of this bacteria or these bacteria are entering the freshwater networks because of where ill people are. We can't exclude wildlife from this, so high densities of wildlife, in particular wild birds, can result in quite high levels of fecal pathogens entering the watercourse. There's quite a lot of studies on this. So there's a map on here that shows where those important bird areas are, both of national and international importance, of which we have quite a lot along the northwest coastline. Obviously, the types of interventions you would use to try and address the problems associated with wild bird concentrations would be very different to trying to address other problems. You wouldn't want to impact on the wild birds themselves. There's also a link to the Wetland Bird Survey portal that shows all the sites that they have recorded as being important for wetland birds. Oh, sorry. And there's a map on here as well that just looks at the density of bird records on NBN Atlas. This will be a biased map because people are more likely to go to areas that they know are good for birds, or there's interesting birds, to record the birds that are there. But in a way, that's kind of telling us that these are the sites that are particularly good for birds and so are likely to have the high concentrations. So it's more indicative of where there might be large populations of birds, rather than it saying that there is definitely higher densities of birds in these areas than other areas. But as with any of the data sets above, it's all around helping you to come to conclusions yourself about where the issues might be and what you need to do next to try and address those issues, whether that's investigate further, set up more monitoring points, liaise with landowners, start to come up with potential interventions and that kind of thing. So there's also the recorded incidents on here that specifically relate to pollution that could be inputting fecal pathogens into the freshwater network. And again, you can click on points on the map or restrict the map just to certain bathing water catchments, as with all of the maps. And also on here, we've got a map that shows the areas that get inundated with tidal water on the highest spring tides. So any of these risky land uses, if they get inundated with the tidal inundation, then whatever those pollutants are that are on that land are going to get washed back into the estuary. when the tide recedes, and so these areas of tidal inundation are potentially more risky, depending on what the land use is, because there's kind of direct input through those tidal waters of the pollutants into the estuary and out to the sea. So the final map in this section is looking at hydrological connectivity. So how well connected an area of land is to the freshwater network. So if you have a really risky land use and it's really highly connected to the freshwater network, it's more likely that those pollutants are going to end up in the river and be transported downstream to the bathing waters. So it's these darker red lines on this map are those overland flow paths where pollutants are more at risk of being transported into a river. Whereas if you have a really risky land use that's not particularly well connected to the freshwater network, so these areas that are blue on the map, it's possibly less of a priority because those pollutants are less likely to end up in the watercourse. So that's something that you need to bear in mind as well, you know, that hydrological connectivity as well as what the land use is. So on here we've also got a section that's looking at priority actions across the northwest in terms of improving bathing water quality, and that's looking at it from a few different angles. So first of all, it's looking at what the partners' priorities are. So Harvey from Ribble Trust conducted a survey of Turning Tide's partners a couple of years ago that was looking at what the partners' priorities are in terms of what they're focusing on or what they think should be focused on to try and improve bathing water quality. And we've tried to map the results of those surveys when it loads. So this here shows what partners' top priority was and what everyone voted for, what their second highest priority was and what they voted for, and so on, all the way down to what their seventh highest, or in this case lowest priority was. So what you can do is you can click on a bar on the graph. So the top priority for most partners was tackling pollution, and so if you click on that, it shows the area of the Turning Tides area, so essentially the northwest, where partners work who voted for that as their top priority. So it's essentially most of the northwest partners said that it was their highest priority, and the darker the purple on the map, the more partners voted for that as their highest priority in that area. Or what you can do is you can click on a particular water body catchment, and all the graphs around the edge update and show you how partners who work in that area voted for the priority. So in this case, this random one I've clicked on, tackling pollution is still the top priority. So this can just help you to see what those working in the area consider to be the priorities, as that might help you to plan work going forward. We've also looked at it from a weight of evidence approach. So there's a lot of information on here. There's a lot of potential sources of faecal pathogens. So how do you start to form an idea of what you need to do to try and tackle these issues? So we've tried to take a bit of a weight of evidence approach to colour the map in, essentially, to say whether something is particularly risky or not in a certain water body catchment. So or the benefit that could be had by delivering certain actions to try and address certain issues. So if we're looking at this top section here, if we were thinking about running education or engagement campaigns around reducing pressure on the sewer network, so things that individuals could do to reduce their impact, and if we turn that layer on, we can see the darker the red, the area, the greater the impact you could have in that area based on its proximity to the failing bathing waters, also the presence of that risk. So this possibly isn't the best example to talk through, but if we were looking at, let's look at education campaigns around pollution from dog feces and reducing the risk from that. So again, it's the darker red water body catchments. Those are those that are within the zone of influence of those failing bathing waters, but also they're in the water body catchments where there are greater areas of public parks where people are likely to be walking their dogs. So it's, you know, combining the evidence that we have there to try and place a weighting on how risky a certain source of pollution is within a water body catchment, and therefore the benefit that could be derived from certain actions there. So there's a whole list of here of types of actions that could that the partnership could undertake, and the issues that they could be addressing. And yeah, it just applies that weighting. What have we got here? This is looking at how nature-based solutions could impact on reducing pollution. From this case, that's coming from large wild bird populations. So there's all sorts of things on here that you could click through, and it could give you some ideas about projects that you could do. So there's also a section on here that looks at who's operating in across the northwest and who is working to in some way improve the bathing waters, and this is on here so that, you know, it can hopefully help you to come up with collaborative projects and approach partners and work together to address these things. So there's a map on here that shows the areas of operation of the Turning Tide partners who responded to a questionnaire. So there's a couple of different ways that you can use this. So you can either click on an area on the map, and when my internet catches up, this top box here will give you a list of Turning Tide partners who operate there. Or if you wanted to see where a particular Turning Tides partner operated, you can click on them in the bottom list, and the map, when it catches up, will update to show you where they work. So this could help again with that collaboration and planning of projects, of joint projects. There's also a map on here that shows the types of activities that Turning Tides partners are doing and where. So if I just show you one example, if we want to see where Turning Tides partners are working to reduce agricultural pollution, the map will update to show you where people are working, or, you know, education and engagement, you can see where partners are working, again to help you to plan joint projects. And there's a map on here on showing the WINEP actions as well, so you can see what the water companies are planning as well. And the last section on here is all around monitoring. So there's a couple of case studies on here around how you might go about carrying out further monitoring to assess where the pollution might be coming from. So there's a case study of some monitoring that Ribble Rivers Trust did in the tidal region quite a few years ago now, from 2015 for a couple of years after that. And it kind of runs you through what we found by doing that monitoring in terms of how it helped us to hone in on where the risky tributaries are that might be contributing high levels of faecal pathogens into the estuary. And there's a breakdown of all the data that we collected. And then this is a case study that we carried out for CFAS in 2023 around how we could do more detailed monitoring in the tidal area of the Ribble to hone in on where the pollution was coming from that was impacting on the shell fisheries that are in the same area as the bathing water, so it's like directly applicable. And so we put together a suggestion of how you might monitor the rivers in that tidal area to focus on specific risky land uses that we know are down there from all the data that we've shown you, and how you could carry out that monitoring to try and hone in on where the pollution was coming from, so you could then come up with interventions to try and address it. And then if we go down a bit further, you can see you know, a really detailed example for a particular tributary that we know has lots of bacterial pollution coming from it from our own monitoring. So this is on here to help you to, you know, come up with your own monitoring plans and see how you might do it. And then there's just a reminder of all the other considerations that you need to take into account with monitoring, so things like rainfall levels and river levels and that hydrological connectivity, tidal flows, and so on. So that was well, not very quick, a slightly quick run through of this Turning Tides tool. Hopefully it's given you a good idea of how it combines a lot of information that's already out there into one place that can help you to form your own decisions about where the issues that are contributing to failing bathing waters might be coming from, and what you can do next to try and address those issues or investigate them. And as I mentioned, at the moment, this tool focuses just on the 10 failing bathing waters currently, but we are working to get some funding to expand it across the whole of the Northwest for all of the bathing waters, not just the failing one. If anyone has any questions, you can email me on ellie@ribbletrust.com. That's ELLIE at ribbletrust.com, and I can try and help you. Thank you.